All right, welcome back. Hi, Haley.
Hey Ariel, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. We've got lots of stuff going on with you traveling a bunch this week.
Yeah, and you're also going to Houston this weekend, aren't you?
Yeah, we just miss each other,
I know.
unfortunately.
We'll wave on the
Bummer.
car ride.
I know.
Well, it's okay.
You guys are going to a game, right?
Yeah, we're going to watch the Mets play the Astros.
Oh, fun. That's going to be really nice.
Hashtag sports.
Yeah. Hardcore parkour.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, great, we're gonna go watch game. Gabe's so excited because he got like really close we're like 5 rows from the field. And I'm like,
oh, nice.
It'd be terrible with a baby. And he's like, what do you mean? He's gonna love it. He's gonna watch all the baseball. And I'm like, he's literally not gonna watch any baseball, first of all. He's gonna be looking around at all the people, and he's gonna have to nap at that time at some point. And I don't think he's gonna be able to sleep at the game. So we'll see how it goes with
It's going to be
6 month-old.
toasty too.
Yeah, I heard that the Minute Maid Park, so the Astros Stadium, is indoors. Like sometimes they'll close the top and blast the AC. So I'm thinking because it's a daytime game, they might do that. I'm like hoping that they'll do that. So we'll see.
Have you been to that stadium before?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't made it down there for a game yet either. Granted, we're like just getting into the season and I just moved here. So
yeah.
Why would I? I don't know.
You got time.
But I know that like back home, like the Giants Stadium had like a little area for kids to like mess around with the little Coca-Cola slide and all that. So I'm sure like there's some attraction when he's not napping that you guys can go have some fun with. Because I love baseball, but it is a slow game.
Yeah.
So, I admire Gabe's gusto, but I don't imagine Shay is going to be that interested at like 6 months old.
I mean, you know what? We got to start him early. Maybe he'll like it more. I mean, I like tried to follow baseball, but every time I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. And I really do try. So hopefully he'll, be more interested than I am.
That's what you have, hashtag sports husband for, you don't have to put in the effort to follow it. He's got all that in his brain logged for you.
He has all, like when you say he has all of it, he literally has all of it. Like the amount of like baseball fandom that he has is pretty wild. So yeah, it'll be good. It'll be good. I've tried for the sake of, being a supportive wife to like baseball, but we've come to the agreement that I will, like, you have my full support, but I don't really need to be involved. But I like going to games. They're fun. There's more things to do. So yeah.
I'm still on my football journey.
Oh, I haven't even, you know what? I tried watching football too, and that didn't go well for me, but I'm very curious to know how your journey is going.
So my husband played football in college, and his dad played football in college. So big football family. My dad never played football. He played baseball. And then like his adult hobby is he was a very avid cyclist. Like very avid, did all the local Northern California competitions.
I love this.
So when I tell you the only sport we religiously watched in my house growing up was like the Tour de France and Giro d'Italia, I'm not shitting you. That sounds really lame, but like at 6, I had like the yellow jersey. My dad got me to match my little bike, and he went hard and is now very upset as an adult that I really do not like riding bikes. I'm like, you just went a little too hardcore early on there, Pops. Like, it really died out on me. Like, we did some aggressive mountain biking when I was a little too young. I went down a couple times, and after that, I was like, me and the bike don't get along.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've just never been a football person. And even in college, like, it's the West Coast. It is not the same as like SEC or ACC football. Not to say there isn't great talent and great athletes, but it's just like the fandom, the tailgating is just not half as intense. So it was very much like especially once I transferred to Arizona, like we're going to go for the first half pretty hammered and leave after that. And I don't really care what happens, and nor do I know what's going on. So once I met my now husband, I'm like, okay, like this is a football family. Like I need to figure out what the hell's going on. Yeah. So now I have somewhat of an idea. But luckily for me, he enjoys college football a lot more than he does NFL. So
Mm.
it's not like we have an NFL team and like follow that super closely. But it is fun like during the college season. And it's just, I like all the amateur sports better. Like it's fun to see
Yeah.
young kids with talent who are trying to like break in, and like it's just a little bit more of an even playing field. I just think it's more exciting.
Yeah, I agree. I love watching college sports, especially because you look at them and you're like, they're babies. Like this
I
is
know.
potentially the start of their career. It's just very cool to see and to like think about it that way. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know, maybe that makes me sound old, but I always just think about it and I'm like, dude, that is so cool that you've like, unleashed this talent, or, you've worked this hard for this long in your life so far. Like you have so much life ahead of you. It's very cool to watch.
Yeah.
I love
Oh,
it.
I love that. So I saw in your story like 20 minutes ago that you were like trying to sneak in a lift. How'd that
I
go?
literally, I literally like, okay, so very optimistic. I was like, I'm gonna drop Shay off at grandma's. I'm going to come home. I had to like go stop by my parents really quick, which like stop by my parents means I had to walk 400 meters to their house. So, I stopped by my parents' house, talked to my parents for a little bit, and then I was like, shoot, I need to shower. I need to probably pump before this podcast. I need to eat something. I have literally 20 minutes door to door to like get something in. So I did. I really didn't want to pick up a barbell today. My hands are kind of sore. So I did what did I do? I did Romanian deadlifts with dumbbells and some rower hamstring curls and some rower pike ups. And I did like 4 sets of that. And I was like, okay, there we go. Good
Quick
enough.
and dirty. I
Mm-hmm.
like it.
Yeah. Yeah, it worked. It was fine. I'm like in between following programs right now. So this is kind of just like, I like to give myself like a free week to kind of
Hmm.
play around before I
Yeah.
follow another program. I just feel like it could like, otherwise you get, kind of burnt out following something for a super long time. I followed a program for 12 weeks before that. It was the strength program that I released with a friend of mine. And so, yeah, so we followed that for 12 weeks. And then I was like, I'm going to give myself a free week before, because we're going to start a new one in 2 weeks. So I was like,
Nice.
I'll start something next week and then we'll get going again.
Love that. My
Yeah.
I coached 3 back-to-back group fitness classes this morning, and my 5:30, now that it's summertime, all the parents get to sleep in more often because their kids aren't in
Mm-hmm.
school. So it was pretty small. So I was like, all right, guys, I'm gonna work out with you. So I actually got in some lifting this morning, which was great.
Nice.
So feeling pretty good about that. I'm like, my energy's coming back a little bit. So I'm like, hopefully I can scale back up to more than just like 1 or 2 days a week here and there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was good. Did some Bulgarians, got in some RDLs that were fairly heavy. That felt good. Some eccentric focused chin ups.
Mm.
So I was like, the full chin up, now that like I'm feeling the stretching down low, I'm like, oof, I don't know. Like I gotta modify this somehow. Like I'm feeling fatigued and
Yeah.
heavy, and I feel like my whole body's gonna split in half when I get down to the bottom of the movement. So
Yep.
I'm like, maybe just some eccentric.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was good. Just gotten a couple little movements like that. And I was like, I feel like a little bit back to my normal self.
Love that. I don't know about you, but during my first, well, probably like my first and second trimesters, I found it so fascinating and slightly frustrating that like the way your body changes, it changes so quickly and like in different places every time that every time I would go back to a lift of any sort, I would have
Hmm.
to like feel it out first to see even if I could do it the same way as I did it last week, because
Yeah.
like 1 week pull-ups felt great, 1 week pull-ups didn't feel great, the next week they felt fine again. It was like so many things changed. Like lunges felt so weird for the first 30 weeks, and then I finally got a week of lunges in, and then I went into labor like 3 weeks later. So it was like,
There you go.
it was
Lunges
wild.
was the trick.
Lunges did it. Just kidding.
It did
Probably
it.
not.
No, that's funny. I mean, like kind of going down the rabbit hole of just all things strength training.
Yeah.
Um, when you have like a new client, like what would you consider to kind of be the optimal number of days a week to start to incorporate strength training for like someone who hasn't really strength trained in the past?
I do think this is like the worst answer, but I do think it depends on what they've done previously. So like if you're going from no movement to strength training and you have no history of strength training in your background, honestly, I think that you could get away with doing more days, but less in each session, because then it's more of like your body gets to like learn the movements a little bit better that way. It like sticks a little bit better. That being said, there's also like a sweet spot of around 3 days is really all you need to be in the gym to like get any sort of effect. I just think repetition wise, it's helpful to get more movement in the beginning, and your body typically will do better in learning it if you repeat it more often.
Yeah, I actually love that outlook because I think what's difficult for most people who haven't been consistently training for years doing a certain discipline, right?
Yeah.
Like these are the normal average Joe who gets motivated, finds a fitness program, usually overdoes it for a few weeks, then kind of burns out and falls off, and then kind of like repeats this cycle over and over again. Is one, focusing on practicing and perfecting the movement versus like just trying to work out to burn calories is like the first thing that I think falls into what you were talking about. And then the second aspect with mindset shift is like really finding what's going to work best for your schedule for you to stay disciplined. Cause like motivation is fleeting.
Mm-hmm.
Like my opinion, and I actually stole this from Sal DiStefano, and I was like, wow, that makes so much sense. When you make goals when you're motivated is probably the worst time for you to make goals.
Yeah, I agree.
You're going to bite off way more than you can chew. It's not going to be sustainable. You want to make your goals in an incremental fashion where you're like, okay, what's one thing I could add in that I could do forever?
I feel
And
like
like get that down.
I feel like you're in my brain because I literally shared about this yesterday too. I was like, you know, it's very true. And this came up this week in coaching calls with my clients, even. When you start a new program, when you start anything, really, it could be weightlifting, it could be nutrition related, it could be business related, it could literally be anything. When you start something new, motivation is at an all-time high, right? So then you're like, oh, I'm going to do so many things. Like you have such a positive outlook on what you can do. And then it gets to day 3, day 4, where, you're tired. You couldn't control the fact that maybe your kid didn't sleep through the night, or that you, maybe slept in past your alarm, or you didn't have as much time as you thought to meal prep for the week, or X, Y, or Z could happen. And then you run into, oh, well, I can skip it today. Like, I don't really need to do it today. Like, there's always this like internal battle we have with ourselves that rationalizes why we don't necessarily need to do something, or why it's not worth it to do it in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then we run into the issue of, okay, well, I didn't do it yesterday. I really don't want to do it again today. Or like, I didn't do it yesterday. There's no point in doing it again today. There's no point in trying or starting over. Like I have to start all over again. I have to throw out all the vegetables that I bought because they went bad. I have to, go back to the grocery store because I didn't buy an ingredient, whatever it may be. That's 100% the sentiment of like, start way smaller than you think you need to. And that could be even in a strength training routine. Like maybe you're just going to go into the gym for 10 minutes. Maybe you're going to do it at home for 10 minutes. And like, that's what you do for the day. And maybe some days you'll have more time. Great. You get some time back. Some days you won't have more time, and 10 minutes is all you've got.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think from the standpoint of practicing a movement, more repetition's great. For some people, that may not be feasible with their schedule. So looking at something more like 3 days a week. I'm going to throw my sister under the bus here and use her as a quick example. She's getting married in September. So excited for that. But she just ran her first half marathon this last fall, and she's like really enjoying running again. And this podcast is honestly probably how I'm going to get like fired from all my studio fitness jobs. But she participates in one of the large corporate studio circuit training franchises, partially because years ago I used to coach there. I coach at a different one now. I don't train like that, but they're a great source to go coach large groups of people. So she likes to do that during her week, but she still has these certain physique goals. And I'm like, okay, like we really need to ramp up your strength training if we want to get you to these physique goals. But she has crazy work hours and she's supposed to do these 2 circuit training classes every week that are very cardio focused. I'm like, okay, like how many minutes a day could you give me and I will write you a program? And she's like, well, I could maybe do 20 minutes on this day, 20 minutes on this day, and then do like an hour on Saturday. So I'm like, okay, that's what we're going to do. I'm going to basically split like a 40-minute full body strength program into 2 workouts. And you're going to do those on your 20-minute days. And then on the other day, we can actually walk through like a full strength program. And so for her, it's 3 days a week of strength training. But on 2 of those days, when it comes to mobility, warm up, her complex compound movements, her accessory, all the way to cool down, it takes her 20 minutes. So that's not a lot.
Right.
She's really focusing on perfecting 2 big lifts with some activation in the beginning and some cool down at the end, split into 2 different days. And like, that's all. And that's still effective if that's the way you need to get it into your schedule. But just kind of like waltzing into the gym and picking up weights and not really having a plan is not going to get you to your goal.
I think the biggest thing about what you're saying, especially with, a goal that has a time limit, like your sister's wedding, like she wants to look good for that. Of course, I get that. Having a timeline can be really helpful because it also gives you some structure. The same way, like you're saying, having a plan going into the gym helps because human beings thrive on structure, whether we like that or not. Like that is a part of our DNA. We thrive on structure, and not having it will be like the least effective and least efficient use of your time because you're going to go in, you're going to lollygag. Like if I don't have a plan this week, especially, I go into the gym each day with a plan because I know that if I get there, I don't have a plan, I'm going to spend a whole lot of time scrolling on my phone. I'm going to spend a whole lot of time stretching, movements and doing mobility that I don't necessarily need to do more of. Like I do that a lot. And so it really does like waste your time if you don't have that plan. And so for her to have, regardless of what the time looks like, for her to have 20 minutes, like that's plenty of time to get in something. I always say something is better than nothing and something is better than perfect because perfect is a very unrealistic standard for us to achieve.
Absolutely.
And if we can just get something in, that's progress, right? And sometimes that something is 20 minutes, sometimes that something is an hour, and you have that time. But it's really working with what you've got, not with what you wish you had.
Yeah. So kind of on this topic of someone who loves cardio and trying to get her to strength train, what would you say to all those ladies who are like terrified of strength training? I don't want to get bulky. I don't see the benefit in that. Like, I just want to be leaned and toned. I hate that word, but another controversial statement.
Yeah.
Toned is a made up concept, you guys. It's not a real word, but yeah, like how do you tackle that conversation? And like, what are some of the main points you like to share with your clients as to like why strength training is such a benefit?
Like I think it's really hard to change someone's mind if you think that strength training is going to make you bulky, like that's a very hard thing to change in someone's mind. And I even noticed in myself, I had this like underlying message going on in my head up until like 2 years ago, really, that strength training was the reason that I was like bulky. Like I have been lifting weights for the better part of 10 years now. And a lot of that was in a CrossFit gym doing high intensity interval training. And I thought, like I didn't have the aesthetic that I wanted because I wasn't training hard enough. And so I did more CrossFit essentially. Like I did more high intensity training. I added more cardio in. I did more things to lose body fat. But it didn't hit me until really 2 years ago that I had not built muscle under that to show. So if you don't have the muscle underneath the body fat layer that you're trying to shed, you're not going to be happy with the aesthetic, even if you do lose the weight, because there's nothing there that looks toned. There's no muscle to show. So you really have to, and this is, I think, the hard part, you have to stop focusing on losing weight long enough that you can eat enough to build muscle. And a lot of times what happens, and this is the part that women are very scared of, especially men are too, but a lot of times women are very scared of the idea of putting on weight for the sake of building muscle. But we have to remember that it's a phase, right? Like we have to go through specific phases of training in order to get the end result that we want, which is that toned, muscular, but lean look. We have to put on a little bit of weight because we need those calories, because muscle is very expensive calorically, right? Like it takes more calories to maintain muscle than it does to prioritize body fat. If you don't have enough calories to spend on maintaining and building muscle, your body is going to resort to the cheaper option, which is storing body fat, because that takes less calories to store. Because you also, don't forget, need, to give a certain amount of calories to your organs that keep you alive. And those are pretty calorically expensive themselves. So like we have to look at it in terms of there's phases that we have to go through. We have to go through a muscle building phase, which it comes with gaining a little bit of weight, because you can't just put on muscle. That, unfortunately, we haven't figured that one out yet. I don't think it's humanly possible, but there's a lot about the human body that, we still don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot will argue you can do like a super slow recomp. You're still going to see fluctuation there though. Like it's not a perfect like net negative, right?
Right. Exactly.
But kind of taking on a recomp, again, that's hard for people who make their goals solely on aesthetics.
Yeah.
And I always try to deter people from making aesthetic goals and making measurable goals. Because if your goal is, I want to look a certain way, you're probably going to get somewhat close to that. And now your idea of what you should look like is going to be different, and it's arbitrary. So you're going to constantly be disappointed and get yourself into this cycle of, I am a failure, I can't achieve my goal. A lot of negative self-talk, potentially spiraling into some like disordered thought processes towards your relationship with exercise, towards your relationship with food. And I think a lot of women do this. I also think this gets really intertwined with our nutrition as well.
Yeah.
Because so many women, when they get into I need to lose weight mindset, go directly to calorie restriction. Or they find some kind of fad diet where they're like, oh, but this is healthy for me because ABC, when really what that fad diet's doing is just restricting some kind of food group, which overall restricts your calories. Right. So like they all end up kind of meeting the same end goal, which is lowering calorie intake. Yet I would argue that a lot of somewhat not even very health-minded, somewhat health-minded women, especially in the US, undereat and are too close to their resting metabolic rate as it is. And then they try to do a calorie cut while they're then going to the gym to expend more calories. Right. So really what you're doing is you're tricking your body and your metabolism into being more efficient, and more efficient is not better. In a modern day and age, we want to be less efficient with our metabolism.
Right.
Here's what I mean by that. Our ancestors moved all the time. They had to hunt, they had to gather. When they did get a kill and they had meat, they shared it with everybody. Like they were not eating huge quantities of food, yet they were on their feet, what you would think, burning an insane amount of calories all day long, but they weren't. Their bodies got really, really efficient at burning a very minimum amount of fuel and maintaining a decent enough amount of body fat so they had stored fuel for all that activity and lack of food. So if you're getting into that mindset, you're basically training your body. Like no one's metabolism is broken. Like it's responding to our behavior. So if that's your behavior of like restrict and more activity, your body is going to get better at storing more body fat because it wants more energy when it's feeling depleted.
It needs it.
It needs it.
Yeah.
So really what you're doing is you're telling your body store more fat.
Yeah.
And that's not the goal. Like, right, they're doing those behaviors thinking I'm going to get smaller. So trying to change the mindset into how, when I am sitting down doing nothing, can I encourage my metabolism to burn more? Right. And that's through having higher muscle mass percentage.
Yep.
Like you said, muscle mass is so expensive calorically.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like if you are someone who's newer to strength training, or like, you know, Instagram is like your social place and you don't follow a lot of like accounts for the purpose of education, I challenge you to go follow some women in the strength training space, not like the Instagram influencer that's like doing random workouts every day on the yoga mat with 10-pound dumbbells, like bitches who strength train. So like Laura Christie King, who's part of the Paragon training method. Sherelle Grant, she's out of Australia. That girl's strong, dude, and she knows her shit. Camille LeBlanc. You know, like following these heavy hitter women who really do strength train. They will share occasionally when talking about macros, like where their body fat percentages are at, how much they weigh, and how much they eat in a day. And I guarantee you the average American woman's jaw would drop because they look cut, but they eat almost 2,500 calories a day and work out 3 days a week and get their walks in because they've spent years building up this muscle mass that allows them to be super metabolically inefficient and burn calories all the time when they're not working out.
Which I love that explanation that you gave, because that I think is very hard conceptually to understand, right? Like I think that because there's so little that we know about the human body, there's a lot of things that normal people, I would say, like people that are not super interested in the education around exercise science and our health in general, they're not going to go looking for those explanations. So they just see someone say, you know, I have, you know, like I weight lift and I eat 2,500 calories and this is how I look and I'm lean and toned and like everybody wants my aesthetic. And then women look at themselves and they say, I could never do that. Like that's her genetics. But really, maybe part of it is obviously genetic, because there are some body types that are going to be a little bit more genetic based, but that doesn't mean that for your body type you can't have a leaner aesthetic that you want. It takes more intentional movement and nutrition to get there, a little bit more intentional than we think. With like, we can't just go to the you know, group fitness classes. We have to have something that is structured, that is probably lower intensity. And we need to also likely increase our NEAT, which is our non-exercise activity. And that's, I think, a thing that we don't necessarily think of as much. But when we are getting more efficient with the way that our body processes our calories, the way that our body burns calories, our non-exercise activity goes way down to the point where we talk slower, we blink slower, we don't move as much. Like those are all your body's adaptations to storing energy and reserving it for our organs, for the things that are keeping us alive. If you focus, you know, on getting yourself some more nutrients, that will help maintain muscle mass more. That will help increase your non-exercise activity. You end up burning more calories just naturally. You don't really have to think about it.
Yeah. And to elaborate on that, so for those who aren't familiar with the term NEAT, or they haven't heard the term NEAT before, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, the thermogenesis part is just basically the scientific word for caloric burn. And then obviously non-exercise activity. So the way you guys can improve your NEAT is if you sit at a desk job all day, try to stand, right? And take intervals where you're standing instead of sitting. You'd be surprised how much more calories you burn standing from sitting.
Yeah.
Even though it's not an exercise amount, but your body is using more metabolic energy when you stand.
Yeah.
People who fidget have higher NEAT than people who don't. Parking your car a little farther away and walking, taking the stairs when you can. All of those things help increase your NEAT.
Mm-hmm.
And this ties back into the conversation we were having even with like pregnant women and insulin sensitivity in the last podcast, being able to go for a walk after every meal to help manage your insulin so you don't get as big of a spike. It's similar with your NEAT. Like you can take that walk after a meal that's very short, but at least you have little intervals throughout the day that interrupt stagnation and help increase that NEAT for you.
Yeah. And I will say, like, if you feel like it's really, really hard for you to do those things, like it's hard physically, you don't have the energy to stand while you work or to park farther from the grocery store or to get outside for that walk, you're not eating enough because your body won't let, like, our bodies are very smart and they essentially will do things to, keep us safe and keep us from overexerting ourselves if we really don't have the energy to spend. And so if you're really finding it hard to do those things and it's not a like, oh, I don't have time, but it's like, I'm so tired, I can't do that. Likely you're not eating enough to be able to increase that NEAT naturally, because those things will also pick up the more that you eat, the more energy you have to spend.
Yeah, 100%. And we put a big focus talking about these topics on women specifically, just because it's starting to change. Like we are seeing, thanks to Brett Contreras and like the Booty by Brett movement, man, like we are seeing a lot more ladies want to go lift heavy and like sculpt their legs and sculpt their glutes, which is great. So thanks, Brett. But I think obviously the female population historically has been much more like averse to strength training, that fear of getting bulky, but all these same concepts apply to men too. I mean, these are just basic strength training concepts, how our metabolisms adapt to our activity and our calorie needs. And I think too, like something to be mindful about is when we are building muscle, like muscle gets bigger and stronger or it shrinks, right? And like you were saying before, if we don't have any muscle and definition underneath our layer of body fat, which there's a certain amount of body fat we all need, it's different for men and women, but it needs to be there. If you don't have that muscle mass there, even if you lose that body fat, like there's not going to be that quote unquote toned look you're looking for because there's no definition. There's no growth in that muscle belly. So you're not going to see the curvature and the separation between your deltoid going to your bicep, right? You're not going to see your tricep have any differentiation from your bicep.
Yeah. You're not going to see abs if you want abs. You're not going to see like muscular or like toned leg. Like you're just going to see skinny fat because there's nothing there. And I say it because I also like experienced it myself. Like I spent so many years trying to see that definition, see the definition in my arms and my back and my legs and my core. And I didn't. And I was getting so frustrated and I got so burnt out trying to eat less to see it and like do more while I was eating less to like get that definition. Until finally I like hit a point where I was like, I physically can't sustain this any longer. And I'm only like 28 and I don't understand how people do this their entire lives. Like it's just miserable. And so once we moved into the house, I really like started focusing on just doing things heavier, like lifting heavier and not lifting for as long and not lifting for as often and not doing as much cardio. And I started to finally feel like really solid. And like, I get so excited about it because, like imagine, I think about my mom. My mom spent years just trying to lose weight. And I just saw how miserable she got and how much she like hated her body until I like finally got her to start going to a gym and she'd started doing like group fitness classes, but she started lifting weights. And like the change I saw in her energy levels, in the way that she looks at herself, there's still a little bit of that because you can't undo that, in a year if it's been your entire life.
Yep.
But just the small changes like that are so powerful, and it doesn't happen if you keep chasing being smaller.
Yep. And I think something to keep in mind about being smaller, if you look at some elite athletes, men or women, who are low in body fat percentage, have visible muscle definition, who are the athletes whose, their skin looks good, their hair looks good. They're not 3 weeks pre-prep from a bodybuilding competition where they're getting to dangerously low body fat percentages temporarily for the purpose of their sport. But someone who is their walk around maintenance, really great ratio of body fat to muscle mass, I think most people would be shocked at how heavy they weigh.
Yeah, they're dense.
They're super dense. Muscle weighs more than fat. And it is shocking to them, the difference. I mean, when I was a college athlete, I also had a part-time job. I had 2 ladies that worked at this front desk with me that were great, all around the same age. We were all between 5'2" and 5'3", and all within like 2 years of age of each other. And I've never been like a super thin gal. Like I've always taken to building muscle and muscle definition. Like I definitely have that more in my genetics. Like my dad can just look at a dumbbell and his like bicep will blow up. And I just like, I kind of also got those genes, like one set and my arms look great for a week. I don't know why, but I'm very lucky. I'll take it.
Praise be.
My legs, not so much, but my arms, like I definitely got those genes in the upper body. But I remember them asking me fitness advice one day, and I'm a college athlete at the time. Like there were so many things flawed about what I thought. I was still learning, like that I'm not in the industry working in it myself yet. But I remember just being like, oh yeah, like talking about strength training, this and that, like doing really small amounts of like HIIT cardio, like pushing a sled 5 times or doing like, 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off sprints for under 5 minutes, for like doing a little bit of a conditioning. And they're just like, yeah, well, like you must weigh nothing. You're so low in body fat. And I was like, how much do you think I weigh? And they're like, well, like I weigh 105 pounds. You must weigh less than me. And I'm like, girl, I weigh 35 pounds more than you. And they were shocked, like so shocked. But they had never been in like a regimented strength training program yet. Like I could barely flex at the time and I had some ab definition and they did it. I was like, but that's a muscle you have to build. Like everyone says abs are made in the kitchen, which is true. Like you need to be low enough in body fat percentage for them to be visible. And for some people, depending on how your torso is structured, they're more visible than others. But if you're not actually building the rectus abdominis, building the obliques, getting some definition within those more superficial muscles in your core, again, like back to the skinny fat concept, like you could lose a lot of body fat, but you're not necessarily going to see abs.
Yeah, you may not be happy with it because there were no abs there. I mean, there's always going to be, like, you're always going to have some muscular like build, right? Like you need it to keep your skeleton in place, but it's not enough for you to see it. And so that's kind of the concept that we're talking about is, you have to build the muscle to be able to see the muscle when you lose the body fat, which means that you need to go into a period of focusing on building muscle. It doesn't have to be all the time, but if that's what you want, ultimately, like that's kind of the focus that you're going to have. You're going to have to give it that dedicated time.
Yeah. So how many times in your fitness journey up until your strength training little change of mindset,
epiphany,
when you were like, gosh, I just need to lose a little bit more body fat, here's what I'm already doing in my routine, how many times would the suggestion always be, do more cardio?
The unfortunate thing is that I never asked anybody for help. I went through this all by myself, and I kept just doing, this is very much my personality though. Like I kept just doing more research. And everything I saw said, do more strength training, do more strength training, do more strength training. But what I saw on social media was all of these really lean women doing more cardio. So like I started running more and I started eating less and I kept doing HIIT training because like I saw all of these women in the CrossFit space and they were all doing like they had the body that I wanted and they were all doing CrossFit. So I was like, that's obviously what I need to keep doing. And I just have to do it harder. I have to do more of it. I have to do it more often. And then finally, when we were on the road, because we lived in the RV for a year, and when we were on the road, it was less feasible to keep doing that because we just had like, less space. Like not less space necessarily because, we had all of outside, but like I didn't have, a gym consistently to go to, like a CrossFit gym. So I really did start, kind of pulling back on that and doing more body weight training, doing more pull-ups, we had like 2 heavy kettlebells. So I did a lot of heavy kettlebell work, things like that. So I ended up kind of naturally morphing into doing more strength training. And so that kind of like started showing me that, oh, if I just like lifted more weights, I actually would feel better. And then, it wasn't until I did that for probably 2 years, not eating enough, until I finally was like, what if I ate more? And then I ate more food and then my muscles started to like really fill out. And I noticed it in myself. And I really do think that I would have saved a whole lot of time if I worked with a coach that was like, do these things. But up until that point, I was like, no, I'm going to figure it out on my own. I was like very stubborn about doing that. So I don't think wasted is the right term because now I like can speak to it from experience, but I would have been more efficient with my time had I asked somebody to guide me on that.
Yeah. And I think it's important to like recognize, even for me, like I use programs that other people write. I mean, I'll write programs for clients myself, but sometimes it's really nice to have a third party be like, when I'm like, hey, here's my goal, here's my lifestyle, here's what I'm struggling with. I'm like trying to piece this together and have them just know because it's just an outside looking in perspective. Like, hey, here's what you need to do. And like, there's no shame in that.
Yeah.
At all, So I think that's important to keep in mind. I almost never do workouts that I make.
No.
It's easier for me to take that accountability from somebody else and be like, okay, like this is what they wrote. I paid for it because I paid for it. I really should do it. Like that's part of that discipline and accountability that works for me. If I purchase a 12-week program and then I don't do it, I'm like, well, that was a fucking waste of money, like motivates you to want to do it. Where if I wrote it for myself for free and it took me, an hour out of my day or 2 hours out of my day, it's like, oh, well, I could always write another one.
Right. Or like, oh, I'll do this later. Like, I really want to try this, or I want to, do this instead. But
the thing that gets me into trouble is like, I'll start doing something. I'm like, what if I did this other thing instead? Yeah. Because I wrote it. So I feel like I could plug and play.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, you need to stick to it.
Right. Yeah. That's the thing. I really do believe that like investing in having an objective third party to guide you in these things can be so, so, so helpful because you don't have to think about it by yourself. And a lot of times you are going to be your biggest, worst enemy in talking yourself out of doing something. But if you are accountable, whether it's paying for something or the fact that like with my clients, when they sign up for our 12-week program, they have access to an app and they, input their weights into the app.
Yeah.
So I see that. My co-coach sees that. They know that we see that. They get a notification if they don't complete the day. Like there are all these forms of accountability within that. And some people just do better. Me personally, I do better when I have those accountability, checkpoints, because otherwise it's like, if I'm just accountable to myself, sometimes that's not enough. Sometimes
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. And especially coming from Oli, like you always work out in a team. Like, it's not open gym usually with Olympic weightlifting gyms. It's like there's the set hours. Some gyms offer morning and evening. where it's like that's team training for those who like are doing our program and like competing locally or nationally, depending on the level of the athlete.
Mhm.
So you go and like you're all, whether you have a private program like personally for you or you're doing the team workout, like you're all there doing it together. Like having that community feel is like super motivating, which is why group fitness can be really great. Unfortunately, most of group fitness for the public that's like not super niche is just really cardio focused. And even when there's like a highlight on something like, oh, it's a strength day, like it's still intervals. Like it'll be 30 seconds of work with 20 seconds of rest for 4 sets.
Yeah.
That's like 20 seconds is not enough time for your ATP to reproduce. Like you're going to change over into different forms of burning that require oxygen. And it's going to, you know, trickle down into more of an endurance style the less you rest. So like for those who we've talked a lot about like the benefits of strength training, like what does strength training look like? There's a bunch of different rep ranges depending on if you're looking at hypertrophy, you know, just like a classic 5x5 strength, trying to increase power where we're going to do lower reps and increase speed, slowing down tempo. Like there's all kinds of rep ranges, but you want to be able to sit down, let your heart rate come down, allow that muscle to have a little bit of recovery. That way we have that ATP back and readily available before we go in and do that next set. So that might be a full 2 minutes.
Yeah. It can be so hard coming from group fitness classes because you're so used to things being so fast paced. And this is something that I definitely struggled with at the beginning too, focusing on strength and hypertrophy is like, it's really hard to make sure you're lifting enough, if that makes sense. Like we're so used to in a group fitness like environment being in the like 70% of our max effort in terms of strength and weightlifting. We really like in order to see the benefit of hypertrophy, you have to be in the 85 to 90% of your effort. And women especially, like we're not used to that. We're not used to getting to that point. We don't naturally like hover around each other and say go heavier, you know, like that's not like the female way. Although I will say that like some of my best training partners were other women, just because, you know, we get kind of competitive. But like the key there is finding those people, the people that are going to surround you and say go heavier. One of the best ways that I've found to assess if you're going heavy enough is videotape yourself. Like set up your camera, video your lift, and if it looks like it's too easy, it's too easy regardless of how it feels. I have to do that for myself because Gabe makes fun of me all the time. He'll be like, you literally look like you just went for a walk in the park. And I'm like, oh my God, that was so heavy. And he's like, no, look at your video. Like, look at your face. If your face is not making a pain face, like halfway through, you're probably not going heavy enough to really get the like change, the stimulus that you want from those exercises.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. And I actually love that as a trick for folks who don't know their 1 rep max. And if you're a newer lifter, or if you're just learning a new movement, I do not suggest you try to find your 1 rep max. No, just learn the movement, allow your central nervous system to adapt to that movement, practice it, perfect it, get better at it. But if you're a seasoned lifter and you've been doing a barbell back squat with really good form, with great full range of motion safely for a long time, in different rep ranges, different weights, I highly recommend that you test your 1 rep max a couple times a year. Because my favorite way to lift is you just put that number in the back of your notebook or wherever you log your workouts, and you say, okay, like if I'm going to do 3x5, what's 80% of my 1 rep max? That's the number I have to do today. And like, that's a very like Olympic weightlifter, power lifter kind of mentality. Like everything we do is by percentage. I don't get to pick my weights and how it feels when I go into the gym. Like it's the math. And then when I retest my 1 reps max, the hope is it goes up.
Yeah.
And then that whole next phase is going to suck because then all those percentages get heavier. But that's the progressive gain that you get in a very methodical way. That's not a guess.
Right. The way I would, for hypertrophy specifically, it's a little different in how you choose your weights just because the rep ranges change so much.
Yep.
And it changes with tempo and it changes with all of these things. But I love that for like strength specific work because it can be so helpful and it's very objective.
Yep.
You know, like you don't have to like really think about it. With hypertrophy, if you're looking for that like progressive overload, having a goal of starting with, you know, whatever weight you're going to start with on week 1 and just trying to go heavier each week. That's another really great way to do it. The challenge with that is if you go too light, it may be too far into, you know, your cycle for you to start like really getting the benefit of going a little bit heavier. But I like the video because that's what gives you that like objective, like, okay, on my first set, if I didn't have a pain face by like, if I'm doing 10 reps and I didn't have a pain face by 8 reps, I probably went way too light. This could be considered a warm-up set. I can go heavier for the next set. And then that's kind of like, you know, another way that you can utilize that. But I love percentage work for strength because it can be so helpful not to think about it.
Yeah. And I think too, another great way if you're in a phase where you're doing a lot of hypertrophy, and let's say your program is like you're going to do 4 sets of 8 and you're not really sure where to start and not sure how to scale that throughout the weeks, maybe change that to 4 sets of 6 to 9. So you can like pick a weight and find kind of where that sticky almost failure point is between 6 and 9 reps. And then maybe the next week you can't go up by 5 pounds, but you can go up by 1 rep.
Yeah, that also
and then
counts.
by the following week, you could go up 5 pounds and try to repeat the first week's rep.
Yeah.
But it's close enough in reps where it's not going to change the fact that like you're in this phase working within this certain rep range. So if like you're really not familiar with how close you are to, you know, your 10 rep max of like an incline bench press with dumbbells, which a lot of us wouldn't know that, sometimes playing with it that way can be a helpful way to make sure that you are actually pushing yourself enough to see an effect.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit earlier about some resources, and I love being able to like leave those at the end of episodes just to, you know, give people, if you want more information, where to find things. So we talked about a couple of really strong women, Cheryl Grant, Camille LeBlanc-Bazinet, Lori Christine King. I would add Lane Norton is a really great resource. He has a ton of experience with bodybuilding and women in bodybuilding. So if you are interested in hypertrophy training, that he's a really great resource. I would say Stacy Sims is really great for like performance for women. And then Marcus Philly. I know you had put him in our list here. Marcus Philly.
I love Marcus's content for the sake of he left the CrossFit world, competitive CrossFit athlete. He will share his side-by-sides of how swollen and like cortisol heavy he was doing CrossFit and how he's made this shift. His brand is called Functional Bodybuilding. So still functional movement, still have conditioning and cardiovascular work for the sake of, you know, healthy heart. If you needed to outrun a bear, great, you can do it. But with mainly a huge focus on building muscle and making sure your metabolism's in a healthy spot. And he puts out so much free educational content.
He does. So and his email is great.
His newsletter is great. So if you're looking to just dip your toe in the water and you're looking for free stuff, Marcus is an awesome page to follow.
Yes, 100%. I did Awaken Training Series, his like original functional bodybuilding programs. I did 1 and 2. It was awesome. It was so fun. And we did it here before we had the barn gym. We did it just with literally dumbbells and kettlebells. And it was awesome. Like I got so strong. I felt really great. I can't say enough good things about his programs. I think that they're fantastic. Camille is another great example of someone who left the CrossFit world because she just didn't feel good anymore. And if you look at her now, you're like, damn.
Yeah.
She looks amazing. And she just had a baby. So she's incredible. Mind Pump. We love them.
We love them. Make sure everyone reads The Resistance Training Revolution by Sal DiStefano. It is like very short and sweet, jam-packed with very digestible information. You know, very much cited with a lot of articles, but very easy to read.
Love
so
that.
Highly recommend.
Yeah. Last book, if we're on book recommendations, is Flexible Dieting by Alan Aragon. Also really easy read, but great, like really full of information for this purpose, basically, like prioritizing muscle, making sure that we're healthy, prioritizing performance. Very easy read, but a lot of really great information in there as well.
Love it.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I also wanted to give you an update that I started reading The Big Letdown. This is a continuation of our conversation from our last podcast episode, and it is wild. I read it at night while I'm nursing Shay to bed, and every time I'm like reading something and Gabe will be next to me reading his book and I'll be like, did you know? And like, like it happened yesterday. I laughed yesterday because I literally noticed it. And I was like, I've been doing this all week, but I like kept going over to him and being like, did you know this ridiculous fact about, the infant formula industry? And he's like, okay. Like did it like 6 times last night. And he's like, you could tell me tomorrow. It's okay.
I know. I was finishing up some Lily Nichols last night because I have like 10 pages left in one of her books. And my husband's eyes were already asleep. And I'm like, babe, you need to listen to this. Like,
you'll never guess.
Yeah. He's just like, I totally believe you're on top of it. I'm just trying to get some sleep.
You got it. You can handle it. You don't need me for this. So funny.
The information we consume late night.
I know, it's wild. But awesome. So we'll include these resources for everyone. I just feel like I needed to tell you that before we.
Oh, I love it. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, of course. You're welcome. We are excited for our next episode to come out. But in the meantime, make sure that you check out all of the resources that we'll link for you. And if you have questions, I would love if you reached out to us. My Instagram is at Ariel_Bloom. And Haley?
I'm at Halesters for now. It's going to change shortly, but HALESTERS.
Awesome. Reach out to us. Let us know if you're listening. Let us know what you love. If you don't love it, you can kindly keep that to yourself. Just kidding. Please share it with us too. We would love to know any and all feedback that you have. And we look forward to coming back next time.
All right. Chat with you guys next time. Let's get some muscles.
Let's do it. Bye, Hales.
Bye.